Most people know Red Fox as the king of dirty comedy, but few realize his final interaction with Nancy Kulp may have been the very thing that destroyed her career. What was the one mistake that left a Hollywood legend in ruins, and why did a secret letter from Foxx change everything? It sounds completely impossible. On one side, you have the foul-mouthed, boundary-pushing pioneer of the Chitlin circuit who dragged network television kicking and screaming into the modern era. On the other side, you have the famously prim, highly educated, bird-watching spinster, Miss Jane Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies. They were from two completely different universes, seemingly engineered by Hollywood executives to never, ever cross paths. But they did cross paths. And that bizarre collision created a shockwave that would eventually leave one of them completely blacklisted, financially devastated, and ruthlessly betrayed by the very people she thought were her lifelong friends. To truly understand the sheer magnitude of this collision, you have to understand the vicious, cutthroat landscape of 1970s television. This was not just a simple difference in comedy styles. This was a total, scorched-earth cultural war. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the CBS network was making a massive fortune on what industry insiders called the rural sitcom. Shows like the Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, and Petticoat Junction presented a sanitized, escapist, predominantly rural version of America. Nancy Kulp was the absolute anchor of this demographic. She was classically trained, held a rigorous degree in journalism, had served honorably in the United States Naval Reserve during World War II, and projected an aura of unshakable, aristocratic decency. She was the safe, reliable face of a bygone era. Then came the legendary event known as the Rural Purge. The television networks violently pivoted toward gritty, urban, realistic demographics. The NBC network unleashed Sanford and Son, placing Red Fox, a man whose stand-up comedy albums were literally sold under the counter in brown paper bags to avoid obscenity laws, right into the living rooms of mainstream America. Red Fox was unfiltered, dangerous, and brilliantly defiant. Constantly battled censors, fought tooth and nail for equal pay, and demanded authentic, unfiltered representation for Black writers in the writers' room. The television industry was suddenly split into two highly hostile camps. You had the old guard of safe, nostalgic slapstick, and the new era of harsh, socio-political truth. Nancy Kulp represented the exact past that the networks were actively trying to execute. Red Fox represented the chaotic, unpredictable future. So when Nancy Kulp suddenly walked onto the gritty, junk-filled set of Sanford and Son in 1975 to play Officer Hoppy's mother, television audiences were completely paralyzed. The stark visual of this refined, polite woman trading sharp barbs with the undisputed king of junkyard insults literally broke the television matrix. But what happened behind the cameras during those specific episodes laid the groundwork for a catastrophic downfall that nobody saw coming. You see, Nancy Kulp made a fatal psychological mistake that actors are warned about on their very first day in Hollywood. She broke the illusion of her own typecast, and she did it by aligning herself with the most polarizing man in the entire entertainment industry. During her time guest starring on Sanford and Son, something utterly unprecedented happened behind the scenes. Kulp and Foxx did not just tolerate each other for the sake of the cameras. They formed a deeply secretive, fiercely loyal alliance. Kulp, who was quietly a staunch liberal and an incredibly sharp political mind off-screen, found herself completely fascinated by Fox's relentless rebellion against NBC executives. She recognized immediately that Foxx was fighting the exact same corporate machine that had happily exploited the Beverly Hillbillies cast for a decade without giving them their fair share of the syndication profits. Her ultimate mistake was believing that she could survive playing by Red Fox's rules. Red Fox was a hardened survivor of the Chitlin circuit. He had a thick Teflon armor built from years of facing down hostile crowds, systemic racism, and constant police harassment over his comedy routines. If Foxx walked off a television set to protest his contract, which he famously did in 1974, he had the street credibility and the undeniable raw talent to survive the intense network backlash. Nancy Kulp did not have that armor. She was an aging character actress heavily dependent on the continued goodwill of conservative, rural America. By publicly and privately associating with Foxx and his radical brand of truth-telling, she started to alienate her core demographic. But the situation went so much deeper than just a few guest appearances on a rival network. Industry insiders later leaked that Kulp had been acting as an underground confidant for Foxx. When network brass threatened to cancel Sanford and Son or heavily censor the show for being considered too risky for primetime audiences, it was Nancy Kulp who quietly leveraged her remaining industry capital. She drafted a highly secret letter to the NBC executives, fiercely defending Foxx's comedic brilliance. She argued passionately that television desperately needed his unapologetic voice to shake up the stagnant medium. She literally put her own neck on the chopping block for a man the executives were actively trying to control. This secret letter was the defining turning point that would eventually seal her total doom. While NBC executives kept the letter buried from the press, the word quietly circulated through the exclusive executive dining rooms of Hollywood. Nancy Kulp was no longer seen as the safe, compliant, entirely predictable Miss Jane Hathaway. She was now viewed by the studio heads as a political agitator, a subversive who was secretly aligning with the counterculture movement. This brings us to the devastating domino effect of semantic cohort matching in Hollywood casting. When a network labels an actor as a problematic intellectual, their casting sheet vanishes overnight. Kulp suddenly found herself locked out of the very sitcom guest roles that used to pay her rent. Producers saw her not as a funny character actress, but as a liability who might start demanding script changes or better working conditions. But the fatal blow came when she took Red Fox's personal advice to heart. Foxx constantly told those around him to stop playing the industry's rigged game and start changing the real world. Empowered by this fierce philosophy, Nancy Kulp made the ultimate career-ending pivot. She left Hollywood entirely and ran for the United States Congress in Pennsylvania in 1984 as a staunch Democratic candidate. She truly believed that her widespread celebrity status, combined with her deep intellectual background and military service, would easily carry her all the way to Washington. She completely and utterly miscalculated the vindictive nature of her former colleagues. She assumed that her Beverly Hillbillies family would support her, or at the very least, respectfully stay out of the way. Instead, the conservative faction of Hollywood, deeply disturbed by her ideological shift and her past alliances with radical figures like Foxx, orchestrated one of the most brutal betrayals in television history. Buddy Ebsen, the beloved television patriarch Jed Clampett, completely turned on her. Ebsen, a staunch conservative who despised her politics, filmed a devastating radio and television smear campaign for her political opponent. He publicly declared that Kulp was too liberal and fundamentally out of touch with traditional American values. It was a calculated, lethal strike. Ebsen used the exact trusting, nostalgic image of the Beverly Hillbillies to systematically destroy her credibility with the very voters who used to watch her on television every week. The technical precision of Buddy Ebsen's attack cannot be overstated. In political campaign strategy, there is a psychological concept called source credibility assassination. When a political attack comes from a known enemy, voters instinctively defend the candidate. But when an attack comes from a trusted, beloved family member, or in this specific case, the comforting television father figure of Jed Clampett, the psychological damage is absolute and irreversible. Audiences simply could not process the cognitive dissonance. Ebsen's betrayal shattered Nancy Kulp's campaign entirely, resulting in a crushing, humiliating defeat where she garnered barely 33% of the vote. But what exactly does Red Foxx have to do with this final nail in her political coffin? Right before the election took place, desperate to counter Ebsen's vicious narrative, Kulp's political team frantically looked for a high-profile endorsement to prove she had widespread, cross-demographic appeal. Red Foxx, deeply loyal to the woman who had once saved his show with her secret letter to NBC, drafted a powerful letter of his own. He planned to publicly endorse Kulp, ready to leverage his massive, groundbreaking urban audience to support her congressional run. But the strategy completely backfired before it could even get off the ground. The moment Foxx's potential involvement was leaked to the press, the opposing political machine weaponized it immediately. They framed Nancy Kulp not just as a liberal, but as an out-of-touch Hollywood radical who was secretly rubbing shoulders with foul-mouthed comedians who represented the moral decay of urban America. Foxx's genuine, heartfelt attempt to save her inadvertently provided the exact ammunition Ebsen and the conservative base needed to bury her forever. The mistake was not just running for office. The mistake was believing that the rigid, unforgiving boxes Hollywood forces actors into could ever be broken without severe, life-altering punishment. Foxx survived his intense controversies because his entire brand was built on friction and defiance. Kulp's brand was built on comforting conformity, and the moment she shattered that mirror to step into Foxx's world, she was permanently exiled. This phenomenon of the brand-breaking penalty is not isolated to Nancy Kulp. We have seen it repeatedly destroy established careers when actors attempt to cross the invisible lines drawn by network executives and audience expectations. Look at M. Glenn Stevenson leaving the smash hit television show MSH at the absolute height of his popularity to pursue his own starring roles, only to be systematically rejected by an audience that flatly refused to accept him as anyone other than Colonel Henry Blake. Or look at M. Michael Richards, who built a universally beloved, quirky persona as Kramer on Seinfeld, only to annihilate his entire legacy in one catastrophic, unfiltered moment on a stand-up comedy stage. In Hollywood, the audience forms a deep, unbreakable parasocial contract with your character. When you violate that contract, the retaliation from the public is merciless. Nancy Kulp violated that contract twice. First, by crossing the sitcom aisle to stand in the gritty, urban reality of Sanford and Son, alongside Red Fox, a man who represented the absolute antithesis of rural innocence. Second, by demanding to be taken seriously as a political force rather than a punchline. Foxx later admitted in his final years that he carried immense, heavy guilt over Kulp's ultimate fate. He realized entirely too late that the protective armor he wore against the media was something he could not share with her. She had stepped into the line of fire to protect him, and when he tried to return the favor, he only accelerated her downfall. The tragedy of Nancy Kulp is not just that she lost a political race. It is that her entire legacy was hijacked and weaponized by the very industry she served faithfully for decades. Red Fox pushed the boundaries of television and became an undeniable legend, but his influence on a prim, proper actress from Pennsylvania led her into a brutal battle she was never equipped to win. The secret letters they exchanged remain a testament to a beautiful, highly misunderstood friendship, but they also serve as a grim, terrifying reminder of how quickly Hollywood will erase you if you dare to forget your place. But Nancy Kulp's tragic story is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the dark, hidden betrayals of classic television. If you thought Buddy Ebsen's political assassination of his own co-star was brutal, you will not believe what the cast of Gilligan's Island did to their creator behind closed doors to secure their massive residual checks. Click the video on your screen right now to uncover the sick, twisted truth of the SSMNO, and I will see you there.